Okay, it's Friday. Happy International System Administrator Appreciation Day, everybody. Apparently, since the year 2000, the last Friday in July is Happy Sysadmin Day. Happy Sysadmin Day, Rich Bates, to everybody who celebrates.
All the sysadmins.
I celebrate privately as a recovering sysadmin.
We're not doing anybody got any big plans for sysadmin day?
You know, one of the saddest days that I ever had, the day that the company took away my administrator credentials.
And nothing demasculates you more than no more administrative privilege.
The saddest day of my career was the day I lost my admin credentials.
Turn in your badge and your gun.
My badge and my gun. Oh,
well,
gosh.
There you go. All righty. We love our sysadmins around here. It's Friday. It's the Q&A. It's Daniel. It's Scott. It's me. We do this every week. We answer your questions in chat on YouTube, on LinkedIn. You can go to CUIHotline.org and fill out the form. There's a number on there that you can call, and we can listen to your question if you would like. And not much to talk about, so we'll see if we can just sort of fill some space here with some, easy questions, since there haven't been any humongous major rulemaking events, in the timeline or anything like that. So, but we're lucky. Scott's here with us. Scott, you've been an international man of mystery, flying to Europe, going to Paris Air Show. What have you been seeing? What have you been hearing?
Yeah, that's an amazing event. If people, I know a lot of people in the United States specifically haven't been to it, but there are a lot of companies there. There were about 900 American companies there, about 2,500 companies overall. So very large event. We had a lot of conversations while we were there, obviously about CMMC, and it was really interesting, the feedback that we got. Most of the American companies there had some level of knowledge of CMMC. I can't tell you how many companies. I would say at least 30 to 40% of the companies that we talked to basically told us they were already certified.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
It is incredible. Considering that was, So
literally incredible.
Yeah, literally incredible. That's a great way to put it. And so it was very interesting conversations. And I think what the disconnect was, I think a lot of the disconnect is the difference between self-attestation, companies doing internal self-assessments versus certifications, right? And companies that have been told by their IT teams or by their security teams that we're good, we've done the thing, we're ready, or we've done a self-assessment, we got a 110. I think that was potentially the disconnect, and not realizing that there was an actual for record certification that had to be done. And then I think some people were just talking out of their ear ends, right? They just wanted us to go away. So yeah, those were interesting conversations. And then, one of the reasons I think that might be part of the reason is, I saw a press release this week. I think I sent it to you guys. It was a company, U.S. company, that did a press release, like a full-on PR newswire press release, basically touting that they had a 110 self-assessment. So,
give it up, everybody. Great job. Huge accomplishment.
It is a huge accomplishment. I mean, even if you're doing a self-assessment, if you're doing it correctly, that is a huge accomplishment.
Absolutely.
But to put a press release out about that, if you get a certification, yeah, go for it. Absolutely. But that misunderstanding, I think, in the industry of, self-assessments versus certification, for record assessments, I think that's a real thing. And, so, something to be aware of. So,
well, and I'll also say this, like, why would they want to say all of a sudden that they're compliant with the thing they should have been compliant with?
Yeah. Right.
It's like, you're kind of exposing yourself a little bit. So up until this point, you weren't.
Right.
Anyways,
very interesting. Very interesting.
Alyssa wants the link to the press release. Maybe we'll send it to you in a DM, Alyssa. We don't want to embarrass.
I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but it's it was pretty interesting.
Alyssa's like, I want names.
We're not coming with receipts. We're not bringing receipts to the table.
Bruce, 110 self-assessment comes with a participation trophy, kind of the upward version of assessments, right? It's like everybody wins.
Yeah, well, so we're at 40 certified clients now. Scott, any assessment takeaways that you've heard about that have filtered all the way up to your
Yeah. So,
your
we've
seat
got,
on the A380 to Paris?
yeah, we've gotten, 40 customers that have gone through and done certifications now. I'll say, when you put a policy in place or a procedure in place, ensure that you're actually doing the thing that the policy or procedure says you're doing. Because if there's been any close calls, through those certifications, it hasn't been on, it hasn't been on technical configuration. Those have not been, potential issues that pop up. It's really about the operational aspects of operationalizing the processes and policies that you put in place. I would say that is probably one of the bigger takeaways, and things that I think people have had some close calls on, is ensuring that that you're actually doing the thing that you say you're doing.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we're coming up on 50, so we'll have to probably do a recap.
Probably another 3 weeks until we hit 50,
Wow.
I guess. So we'll
Crazy.
see how it goes based on what's scheduled right now.
Yeah, and I think the big feather in our cap, just really quickly, was it last week we did 4 concurrent assessments at the same time.
4 concurrent, yeah.
Which is something that we haven't really talked about in terms of how much capacity does your MSP have to support the number of clients that it's rogered up for. A lot of people are signing up lots of clients as fast as they can, but do they have the internal capacity to be able to run them sequentially, or are you like one in, one out on terms of being able to run your assessments?
It's really challenging, and we're doing a lot of work internally to scale that capability, because I fully expect. I really didn't think that we would hit 4, 5, 6 at a time until later this year. I didn't expect it in July, right? But it happened. We actually had a 5th one that wanted to schedule, and we were like, hey, it would be better if you pushed out a week.
It'd be real cool.
Yeah, it'd be cool. But
it'd be a lot cooler if you did.
But so we're trying to scale for that capacity, right? I fully expect that by beginning of next year that we're likely going to start seeing as many as 10 in a week. And the amount of not only prep, but the amount of actual live support that has to happen during an assessment from an MSP is very significant. It is a lot of hours of sitting on calls and walking through, artifacts and all those different things. And when you start doing that over 10, 5 to 10 assessments at the same time, you've got to have a lot of people who can, because you can't sit on 2 or 3 calls at a time. So you can't have like, one super guy on your team that does all the assessments. You've got to have a true team that can sit on, all these calls concurrently. And that's a real challenge. And so that's a scaling problem that not only Summit 7 is going to have to deal with, but all MSPs in the ecosystem are going to have to deal with figuring out how to support concurrent assessments, because the only way we're going to get the ecosystem compliant is by all these MSPs doing lots of concurrent assessments, right? We have a C3PAO capacity problem. We also have an ESP capacity problem, right? And so we've got to solve that. And the ESPs that are in the market have to build themselves from a process standpoint to scale and a system standpoint to scale. And if the MSP ecosystem doesn't do that, then it doesn't matter what the C3PAO ecosystem has capacity for, because without the MSPs sitting next to the OSC, those OSCs are not getting through that assessment. It's just not going to happen, right? And so it's a capacity problem across the board, and MSPs really have to build to scale.
The great and powerful Bruce Landis was asking, I don't know if we have this info. We'll have to have Caleb on or something, in the concurrent assessments, if they were all the same C3PAOs or if they were different.
No, these last week, all 4 of them were different C3PAOs. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah, Alyssa did IV and V stuff beforehand. She said scheduling is the hardest part. So there you go. Yeah, we are definitely hiring. If you know anybody, we are definitely
Come
hiring.
on.
I can, yeah, to hiring, I can tell you, we've all, we're traditionally a technical company, right? We're an MSP. We were a professional services project based. So we've always had lots of technical people on the staff. We didn't hire our first dedicated compliance person until we hired Caleb about 2 years ago. And then we had Carly a few months later. So 18 months ago, we had like 2 people in our compliance team, right? We obviously had compliance knowledge spread throughout the rest of our technical team, but dedicated compliance resources, we only had 2 up to 18 months ago. Well, now, we're sitting at 25, and I think, I met with 3 new hires yesterday, brand new compliance analysts that we've added to the team, and we're hiring compliance people, compliance analysts as fast as we can, because, I think, we have to support, to support, all of our customers in an appropriate manner. So it's, we're definitely hiring. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Daniel, your week in review here, CMMC level 2. These are not the certs that your SaaS app is looking for.
I had a call this week. I feel like the 2 things that I soapbox about is FedRAMP and CRMAs. I'll just go ahead and get it out there. Those are the 2 things. I had a company come to me wanting to do the right thing. They came and knocked on my door, said, Daniel, our marketing and sales team is pushing us to get our SaaS app CMMC certified. I said, that's the worst possible idea you could ever do. Number 1, not applicable, right? Like it doesn't fit the mold, right? I was like, and number 2, if you went and got a CMMC certification, you'd actually be misrepresenting your compliance state to a fair amount of your customer base. And I was like, there's nothing worse than saying that you're CMMC certified, having one of your customers go through an assessment and fail because they were using your product because it wasn't FedRAMP. And they were like, what? I was like, yeah. I was like, you have to go through FedRAMP moderate equivalency or FedRAMP authorization at a moderate level. And they were like, we had no idea. We thought we could just go get a CMMC certification. And I was like, I know manufacturing ERP systems that are out there that on their website, bold flashing neon Vegas text saying, we are CMMC certified, but it's a SaaS ERP application that, guess what, is not FedRAMP. It's sitting on FedRAMP data centers like Azure Gov or AWS Gov. But like we have said many a time, and I will pull this up because I love a good slide deck. Even the FedRAMP team inside came out with an FAQ that said, just because your application is sitting on FedRAMP architecture at a data center level, no, it is not also inherited for full FedRAMP authorization. So anyways, it's just my little thing. I'm happy to educate the industry. I'm happy people are learning what not to do. The great part of this conversation was at the end, I gave them some very clear guidance. I was like, based on their tool and what they're using, I can't imagine CUI being on it. I was like, number 1, you should add a disclaimer about what not to put in this program without FedRAMP. And number 2, actually write an FAQ and a how-to on how to use this application as an asset as part of your CMMC boundary, but it's going to be out of scope, right? It's not, or at worst case, it would be a CRMA, which again, I don't like that. But I was like, give guidance to your customer base saying, hey, just don't put this kind of data in here. You can still use our product to perform your work. You just have to be more restrictive about how you use the application. And that would provide so much education and so much confidence in your product. The problem is you don't get the marketing swag of having an authorized or a certification across your application, which they came to me solely because their marketing and sales team was begging them to be able to be certified at a FedRAMP or a GovRAMP level so they could go after more business. It's like, you can do that. It's going to take, cost you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to go pursue that. But do not just go get a CMMC L2 certification for the sake of good marketing, because you will screw your customer base and you do not want that press release to hit the market. So, side note, Ron Ross is here.
Look at
What is that?
breaking news, everybody. Guest of honor, Ron Ross is in the house, the great and powerful. He's hanging out in Arizona in July.
Welcome, Ron.
God bless you.
Supposed to go to Arizona in the wintertime, but I like hanging out in Arizona. Hope you're golfing in Scottsdale or something awesome.
Yeah.
So Ron Ross is here. Everybody say hi to Ron.
Hello, Ron.
Hello, Ron.
Posts. Even post this, Ron Ross is still fighting the good fight out there.
It's going to be
on LinkedIn.
I think it's going to be Arizona here in Alabama next week. I think we've got proposed 110 temperatures next week. 110. Yeah. That's going to be awesome.
Man.
My air conditioner.
Crazy.
I think I can. It's not doing a great job. So
all right, everybody. Well, if you weren't aware so far, if somehow you missed the news, the major rulemaking milestone has happened. The 48 CFR CMMC final rule has officially left DoD's hands and gone into regulatory review with the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. This is basically the last major milestone and the second to last thing that has to happen before the rule is published on the street and will start to go into effect. The next major milestone is, it leaves regulatory review, and then it goes over to the Office of the Federal Register for publication. We have a blog up that explains what's going on. It links to the podcast that we put out on Thursday that goes through everything. That's a 100% organic reaction, not staged at all, never ever. So if you need to catch up with what's going on, that's what is going on. However, in the excitement, in the rush to get all the information out there and to be the people whose blog you read, everybody wants their blog out there. There's a little bit of snafu. People are often saying that the rule will go into effect on October 1st, that DoD has confirmed that the rule will go into effect on October 1st. The reason why people are so concerned about the effective date is the start of the phased rollout. Once the rule is effective, then all DoD contracts and solicitations will start to get CMMC requirements in phases. And that, is a whole other can of worms. So the effective date is the bright line that everybody wants to know. We can't know the effective date until the final rule is published. So why are people saying it's going to be October 1st? Why are they so confident? Well, through yet another fun coincidence in the saga of CMMC rulemaking, if you look up the 48 CFR CMMC rule in the Code of Federal Regulations, here I am, I'm looking right at it, and then I go down to this subpart 204.75, specifically the contract clause itself. These are the directions to the contracting officer, and it says, on or after October 1st, 2025, all solicitations and contracts, including these blah, 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 except for these solicitations, will use the clause 252-204-7021 on or after October 1st. It's right there in the regulation. 48 CFR went for review. I'm looking at 48 CFR. It says October 1st. So why are the podcast guys saying we can't know the date? The coincidence is that this language in the Code of Federal Regulations right now is the result of the 2020 CMMC 1.0 rule. So if you go all the way back a couple years to the rule that was published in 2020 that created the DFARS 252-204-7021 clause for the first time, and you go all the way down to what the actual text of the rule says, and you scroll down to this part, 204-7503, which is what we just read, 204-7503, it says what we just read, on or after October 1st, use the clause 252-204-7021. This rule that was issued in 2020, back in 2020, is why the regulation that you're reading says this thing. But the rule since 2020 is not being used because we've been waiting for the update. So if you go to the proposed rule in August, the one that is now about to be final, and you scroll down to that part of the rule again, which takes a while to scroll down to because there's all this stuff appended to the front of the rule, you'll see, okay, well, now it's going to be in 204.7504. And here in 205.74.4, it says use the clause 252.204.70.21. And then all of this stuff, it doesn't say anything about October 1st because everything about the phased rollout isn't in the contract clause. It's in the 32 CFR regulation that came out in December. This proposed rule language in August is what is proposing to change what is written for 204.7503. So if you look at what's there now, you're looking at what's going to change. The proposed rule is what it's going to say, and it doesn't say October 1st. The phased rollout in the Title 32 regulation says the effective date of the 48 CFR rule is when phase 1 will begin. Now, the trap here is if they go really, really, really fast, which I don't think is all that likely, but it could happen. It could end up being October 1st, but it isn't DOD saying it will be October 1st. So just be aware. It could be, we think it's going to be late October, early November. But if you see somebody telling you it will absolutely be October 1st, that's what DOD said. It is the equivalent of them saying that CMMC still has 5 levels because they're getting that information from a regulation that came out of the 2020 rule. So just be careful. If somebody's saying absolutely we know it will be October 1st and the rule hasn't even gotten out of regulatory review yet, they're getting their information from old regulatory text, and that would make me suspicious of how on the ball they are about CMMC stuff in general. So this is a temporary way. It's a temporary heuristic. It could be a useful way of filtering through marketing claims from people who say we can help you with CMMC because they aren't caveating their information correctly, which makes me think they're not as up to date as they're telling you, which could be an indicator that maybe they aren't as great at what they do as they say. So just be careful, buyer beware, careful where you get your information. This is why there's this little confusion on LinkedIn and these blogs where they're saying it will be October 1st. And we're like, we have no idea when it will be, sometime in October probably, but that's what's going on. That's how it works.
And this is largely out of DOD's hands at this point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, DOD has handed this thing off. And so it's really up to OMB's timeline at this point, what the effective date is going to be.
Yeah, and so when the rule is published, we will see the effective date. Now and then we actually will know what the date will be. Of course, with my luck, it's going to be October 1st, and everybody's going to be like, "See, we told you it's going to be October 1st," and no one will ever know, and no one will ever listen to me about anything
now
again.
Now let's double click on that for just a second, because not only do we get 48 CFR in motion, the SecDef came out and said some CMMCE things, which I think, at least as long as I've been doing this, I don't think I've ever seen the Secretary of Defense talk about CMMC.
Oh yeah. The haters have been real quiet since this one dropped. So the Secretary of Defense signed a memo that says, I'm directing the DoD CIO in coordination with other undersecretaries of defense. We're not going to procure any hardware or software that's susceptible to foreign influence. And specifically, the DoD will leverage efforts such as the cybersecurity maturity model certification, whatever it's called, whatever that is, the SWIFT process, the ATO process, all that stuff. They listed it first. SecDef listed it first in the list of things that DoD CIO will leverage for this effort. Never in the history of CMMC have we ever had a SecDef level memo say anything about CMMC. It's always been Deputy Secretary of Defense memos, which are great. Those are very high up. This is coming all the way from the top. This is coming from Hegseth himself. So the other thing to note about this is a little bit of a tangent, but I guarantee you what you're going to hear starting in September after the summer, people are going to go, "Ooh, we're getting a new DoD CIO. There's going to be a new nominee for DoD CIO. Katie's not going to be the acting CIO. That's it. Your days are numbered, CMMC. We're getting ready to throw it in the shredder." The SecDef is directing the CIO, not a person, whoever the CIO is. So it doesn't matter who the CIO is going to be. This memo is directing that person in that position. So I guarantee you people are going to be posting about it, being like, "See, time's up. They're going to shred it." And I watch 2 or 3 months from now, it's going to be a thing.
It was quite the 1-2 punch. I mean, that was basically the same day they both happened, effectively, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I
saw them both within 20 minutes of one another, I think. So, oh, did we just lose Jacob?
I accidentally removed myself instead of this. I've never done this before. Who's ever done a stream before?
It's a new food for me.
All righty, let's see here. Elephant in the room. If you want to talk about it quickly, Scott, because people are asking about it. We got a question about it last week. Have we heard any pushback or concern? Scott's still down here, everybody.
Ooh,
yeah.
Have we heard any pushback or concern with the Microsoft situation utilizing China-based engineers? How can MSPs ensure data sovereignty and security under these circumstances? What implications might this have on existing certifications?
Sure.
So on
yeah,
and so
this
forth.
is a big story. Interesting question. And yeah, when the story broke, I was pretty taken aback myself, and so I immediately started calling people that I know at Microsoft saying, hey, can I get some information on this? Can you can I get some info? I need some details. And so effectively they had it has been ended an S-corp program in place that would allow if there was a specific feature that maybe only 1 or 2 experts in the world existed on, and they happen to be non-US persons or what have you, they could essentially talk to an S-corp and say, okay, here, Mr. S-corp, who is a US person, who is cleared to be, an admin in the GovCloud. These are the things that you need to do to go fix the problem or fix that configuration or what have you. And be getting that information from, a Chinese citizen, Chinese national, potentially even sitting in China. I mean, that could happen, right? And so one of the things that has actually come out of this, and, one of the things that I asked for was, hey, we need to end that program. That program needs to go away. And Microsoft, to their credit, pretty quickly, made the change, right? They released a note about 2 to 3 days later that said, hey, we have ended the program. No Chinese nationals in China are going to be part of this S-corp program moving forward. So that is a good thing, right? It's this is something that, to my understanding, after having many conversations about this with Microsoft and with others, this is a program that exists in all of the hyperscalers. This is not a Microsoft specific thing. But Microsoft got called out for it, by ProPublica. And to me, I'm actually thankful that they got called out for it, because I think that was a program that needed to end, right? And they made the right call, and they did that. So interestingly, I saw a couple things come fly on the comments about Fed Ramp and 3PAOs and all those kinds of things. There's nothing in the Fed Ramp program that keeps you from building you could build an entire FedRAMP certified platform in China mainland if you wanted to, right? There's no nationality requirements or sovereignty requirements where a FedRAMP or FedRAMP equivalent system exists.
Which is crazy.
Which is crazy. It is absolutely insane.
That also change. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. But that is the way the program is built. My understanding was, in the original FedRAMP, requirements, there were sovereignty and nationality requirements in the original FedRAMP program, and then GSA removed that for whatever reason.
Oh, interesting.
So I don't know what the reasoning behind it was, but my understanding is that was the case. I don't know if Dr. Ross is still on. He may have some historical knowledge on that himself. But if he could chime in, he may be able to put some clarity on that. But that's at least my understanding. So yeah, disappointing thing from a Microsoft standpoint. I think that they reacted, they made the necessary changes, and we move forward. It's it's unfortunate, but it's fixed.
Yeah. All righty. Let's see. Alyssa had a follow-up when we were talking about hiring. How do we differentiate between compliance and technical folks? Do we at all?
Okay, yeah. So when I was talking about earlier, all of our technical staff, we had trained from a compliance standpoint, right? We had taken our engineers, our architects, and sent them through, CMMC training or what have you. But their primary job is designing, implementing, and supporting the technical platform. When I was saying compliance person, most of our compliance people also have technical backgrounds, but their primary day-to-day job is the compliance side of the equation, the writing the policies, writing the procedures, ensuring that people are following the policies and the procedures and helping customers do that kind of work. So it's different jobs within Summit 7, but many of them have the same backgrounds.
Nice. All righty, let's get to some of the questions that got queued up. We are using a GCC High Enclave from Microsoft. If we need a custom SRM, how do we get we got to this one last week. I don't know if you just want to do a quick refresher, Daniel, about the custom SRM and participation from the Microsoft side if necessary.
Yeah, so you're not going to get participation from Microsoft. So if an organization has FedRAMP authorization on the FedRAMP marketplace, that's enough of the checkbox. We call it a day. Right now, your system security plan should reference and have overlays with their SSP, which you can request via a specific email address if you have a GCC High tenant, and then you just tie those things in for like physical access controls, right? Like if I'm doing a cloud-only enclave, I would inherit the data center protections, physical protections around that data into my SSP. So they will not participate in assessment. Microsoft will not. They will not do a custom SRM. It is their FedRAMP authorized SSP, which is sufficient, but you will want to build out your own kind of integration between those two to show how those controls are being met on the Microsoft side and or then met on your side.
Yeah. All righty. We can't agree on whether our ERP is in scope. We're using an enclave for compliance, but our ERP is outside of it. Help.
Oh, God bless ERPs. ERPs, I love talking to Ryan Bonner about this because a lot of times you can end up leaving an ERP out of scope if you do things like backlinking to where all the technical information actually is. By backlinking, I mean putting a reference point in the ERP saying CUI is over here in the enclave, right? The big question is, like, do I even have CUI at all in this system, right? And so are you uploading technical specifications? Do you have non-public information that is customized on behalf of this defense contract? Do you have ITAR data on behalf of this defense contract? There's several kind of qualifiers to understand. Are you attaching things to invoices? Are you receiving things in POs? Like, are you receiving anything that could be deemed CUI or has a DoD distribution statement on it? If so, those are the things that now have to be redacted or moved out of that system to leave ERP out of scope. So I hate saying this because I like to try and be as definitive as possible, but it is it depends situation. I've mentioned this before. We have a list of CUI keywords I'm happy to share with you if you want to do some e-discovery type services inside of your ERP to try and enumerate, do I even have this at all? That would be a really good place to start. And then from there, figure out how to remove it out or move to a FedRAMP version. Migrations of GCC High can be a little painful. Migrations of ERP systems, multiply that times about 100. So try your best to not have to do that if at all possible.
Yeah. All righty. So we played a fun game inside Summit 7 earlier this week called Can We Watch the Vein on Scott's Forehead Pop Out whenever people post things on Reddit? Scott, hey everybody, I'm part of
I haven't gotten it out yet. So
I'm part of a consulting firm, and we just won a project to assess and help implement NIST SP 800-171 for a client. They don't process CUI yet, but they want to get ahead of future compliance needs. I'm trying to deepen my understanding of 800-171 beyond just the text of the controls. We've won this project, and I only understand the service level text of the controls. What should we really be checking for in an assessment? I'm trying to break down what the controls mean. What are the common gaps that you see? Are there good mapping resources for the intent of the controls? How deep should we go if there's no CUI in scope yet? What documentation is required? I'm hoping to turn this project into a long-term learning opportunity. Scott, there is a small company out there who has hired a consulting firm and I assume sign an agreement to pay them money. And then someone at that consulting firm turned around and then said, "Hey, Reddit, what do I need to know to be successful?"
Yeah, I actually read this thread, and it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, we need more implementers in the ecosystem, right?
Yes.
And every implementer has their first project. There's always a first. You can't get a second, you can't get 100th, you can't get 1,000th until you have your first. So from that standpoint, we need people to do this. The problem is we need people to do this in the right order, right? And we don't need people just jumping into the ecosystem like this and then just winging it, because that is going to get people hurt. That's going to get companies hurt, because OSCs are out there effectively trusting their business to this company, this unnamed company here, and they truly are trusting their business. If this company that's doing their first thing fails, then that company is going to potentially fail, and it's going to cost them business and could cause that business to go under. We need more people to do this, but they need to do it in the right order. You need to go out and train to do CMMC first. You need to build a process internally. You don't need rogue salespeople out there just selling whatever they can sell. We don't need, Daniel, how many times have we told you, no, you can't go do that, right? We've had
37,000 times.
We've had those conversations that, no, we're not ready to offer that service yet. You can't sell that. As much as you want to, you can't sell that yet.
I'm saying I inherited honestly from one of my former bosses, Scott Edwards, who, also a sales guy at heart. So I'm just putting it out there.
Yep. No, but that's very true. But every company has to have their first. So I did read this thread, and I read this one, and this poor guy that posted it, he got roasted in the thread, and I felt bad for him, because to some degree,
at least he's asking.
He's asking so he's asking, he's trying to figure it out. He was essentially thrown this project by the sales team, the business development team in his company, and said, "Here, go figure this out." He's at least trying to go figure it out, right? This was not his failure. This was the sales and leadership at his company's failure.
He was set up to fail.
He was set up to fail. This guy can't win, right? And so again, nothing against this guy. He's trying to go figure it out. He needs to go get some actual training. Go to an authorized trainer. Go take a CCP course. Go do the things. We need more good implementers. Yeah. But that's the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, it was definitely quite the firestorm in the comments there. So, alrighty, let's keep going here. Okay, the gajillion-dollar question: there won't be any CMMC level 2 certifications required until phase 2 of the phase rollout, right, everybody? Well,
by who?
Here's the problem, right? Like we talked about before, the text of the proposed rule that's going to revise 48 CFR for the CMMC program says, if you want to know about the phased rollout, you got to go read 32 CFR 170, the CMMC policy. And if you read 32 CFR 170.3, where they talk about the phased rollout in the 4 phases, they say on the effective date of the 48 CFR final rule, phase 1 will begin. CMMC level 1 will go into contracts. CMMC level 2 self-assessments will go into contracts. And per DoD discretion, they will use CMMC level 2 certification in place of CMMC level 2 self-assessment. So after the proposed rule came out, we were like, well, what does that mean? Like, what does discretion mean? When in our webinar on the final rule, we were like, well, that's a big question mark. So be very careful and talk to your customer. What are they going to do in terms of discretion? It's a very open-ended policy. That is not a guarantee that that first phase will not include CMMC level 2 certification assessments.
Well, even beyond, sorry, Jacob.
No, please.
Well, even beyond that, it's not just about what the government's going to require. The primes are building teams, and they are requiring certifications to put you on their team, right? So that is already happening. There are teams being built where primes literally are telling companies, you can't be on our team for this pursuit that we're planning in 12 months unless you already have a certification.
Yeah,
That's
always the X factor, right? So, the 32 CFR guidance says, okay, 1 calendar year after the effective date, phase 2 will begin, and then CMMC level 2 certification assessments will be in the pertinent contracts and solicitations. So, we didn't really have any information about what discretion meant until the DoD published their memo that provided guidance to the acquisition workforce about what you're going to do. And it says that at the conclusion of the phased rollout, CMMC is going to be in all contracts and solicitations at the appropriate level. But how do you determine the level of CMMC that's required? And it says that the level of CMMC required is dictated by data type, and that blah 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 blah. Let's see if I have it in here. Did I scroll too far? So in here, they say CMMC level 2 certification is the minimum assessment requirement when the planned contractor will require the contractor to process, store, or transmit the data types in the Defense Organizational Unit on the NARA CUI registry. So if you have controlled technical information, which is most people, the minimum requirement, according to the guidance in the memo, is CMMC level 2 certification. During the first phase of the phase rollout, it says that per their discretion, they can say you need level 2 certification instead of a self-assessment. So my question is, Stacy got up at Seek West. We've heard the DoD say that their intent is for self-assessments to be the thing in that first phase. But that's not what the policy document says. The actual policy document does not conclusively say that there will not be certification assessments in that first phase. And because it does not conclusively prohibit level 2 certification assessments in the first phase, you are not guaranteed to get a self-assessment requirement. So if you bet on getting a level 2 self-assessment requirement in that first year and you're wrong, you're screwed. So you have to plan for the worst case scenario. I think there are going to be more certification assessments than self-assessments because of this squishiness. Some people think that it will be the opposite. Ultimately, we don't know. And so you're making a bet, and you need to be informed of what kind of bet you're making, because it is a very risky bet to make in those first 12 months.
Here is the problem that I see. We know that contracting officers, like any human being, wants to CYA themselves. They don't want to get fired. They want to try and get a promotion, and they want to make sure that they're protecting the data appropriately. They're not reading 32 CFR. They're reading this memo that was distributed to them about the guidance when CMMC goes into effect. This is the equivalent of a cheat sheet for them on what to do for contracts. They're not even going to realize that they should be doing something different. They're going to take the higher of the two watermarks for their own personal coverage. That's my opinion. I believe the intent was self-assessment. If that was the case, they should have mandated do not put certification requirements on any contract in year one, period. But they didn't do that. And people's behavior, we've seen this with either over or under marking from contracting officers, like the over marking, especially, they're doing it for CYA protection, right? And this is the same type of thing. And we had a contracting officer, or you did, Jacob, on one of your podcasts a while ago, saying, wouldn't it be lovely if I had less proposals to review, because that was less people submitting to actually be awarded the work. Wow. I can pick 3 versus 30, right? Yeah. So my workload actually becomes less if I put a higher requirement on the solicitation.
That's a hot take right there.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what we've seen from former contracting officers before. Okay, so people are posting this in chat. People sent me this in DMs, and they go, well, look, on the CMMC About page from the CIO website, we got this diagram, and it says self-assessment in the first phase. Okay, I understand. This is not policy that got sent out to the acquisition workforce. This is their intent. This is what Stacy said they would like to have happen. They don't include the caveat from 32 CFR that says we have discretion to include certification. So I'm not saying that there won't be self-assessments. I'm just saying that the policy is not as watertight as people think, and people are assuming that there will be no certification assessments. And if you're the one that said we're going to do a self-assessment and you didn't prepare, which, let's all be honest here, when people say we're hoping for self-assessment, that's why they're hoping for self-assessment, because it's not as intense, right? Not saying people are going to fib their scores, but let's all be real here, right? If you suddenly get the requirement for a certification assessment, all things being equal, most people start to get very nervous because they don't feel like they're going to have the same level of fidelity from their self-assessment to their external assessment.
To me, what the DoD says about this honestly just doesn't matter, though, because what matters is what your prime says, right?
Yeah,
I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that the DoD says for the next 12 months you're going to do self-certification. It doesn't matter because the vast majority of the DIB are subcontractors. They're not prime contractors. Primes get to worry about what DoD says, but subs have to do what the prime says. And the primes are going to be saying, get certified or you're not going to get on the team.
Yeah. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. I hope everybody gets another year to prep. You get more time, you get more budget, you get more runway, more people can participate, more people can get certified. I hope everybody gets, special treatment. What I'm saying is that if you are trying to plan strategically and your leadership team says, we don't have to worry about this for at least another year after the rule gets published, they might be making a mistake that could be a dire one.
I mean, Scott, to your point, Leidos came out with this months and months ago, basically saying our BD team can't just pick best in class. They've got to also bring in compliance to their teams, like when they're looking at subs and teaming partners. Lockheed, to the other content we've generated the past couple of weeks about this, are going to start performing spot check audits of unmet controls of their supply chain based on their CCRA submissions. They are so concerned about who they can actually work with. And guess what? A lot of these primes, this is my opinion, they went and got certified. And then once they were certified and everything was taken care of, then they're focusing on their supply chain. They went up and gobbled up consultants and assessors and said, make me compliant. And then once they were compliant, they're like, oh yeah, now go help our supply chain.
And how different are these memos and these statements from the primes coming out now versus when we were like begging and pleading with them at CS2 and they were on stage to give us some information. They didn't say any of the things that are in these memos now.
Because guess what? They weren't ready.
Right.
Yeah. I'll tell you right now, they weren't ready. Until they were ready, they were not going to help educate their supply chain even further, quite honestly, because they didn't want the risk of all of the support structure being gobbled up by their subs and them left in the cold being non-compliant.
Yeah. So Dillick says that phase 1 should be implemented to give OSCs a way to contend with the C3PAO lead time. If you dig into the 32 CFR rule, that is exactly what DoD says phase 1 is for, that they're doing the phase 1 to contend with the ramp up period for the industry. That is its intended purpose. However, it still comes with the caveat of DoD discretion. So don't bet on getting self-assessment. Daniel?
Hot take over here. Here's what's fascinating. C3PAOs, at least several that we know, only have a few week backlog because so many people that signed up for assessments cannot get through phase 1 of the assessment, which is just providing their documentation.
Yeah.
If I hear one more time, C3PAOs are the bottleneck, I can tell you right now, there are hundreds of companies that are in a suspended assessment state because they have not been able to provide the evidence as part of the first step of the process.
We had significant meetings this week with the C3PAO. Great C3PAO. They only have about a 3 to 4 week backlog. Right now, there are some smaller C3PAOs out there that truly are already booking out into late 25 and early 26. Right. But some of the larger C3PAOs that have scale and infrastructure, they can book you for an assessment in September, right?
From what I understand from speaking with Matt Travis recently, they expect there's going to be 100 C3PAOs by the end of the year, and so that would be kind of in line with Q4 final rule, start of phase 1. So, whatever handful of contracts come out at that period, 100 C3PAOs, that's what we got the ramp up period for.
So 100 C3PAOs, that is great. Good stuff, right? Guess how many certified ESPs there are?
Ooh, I'm going to go with 11.
No,
I'm going to go with
20.
22.
Less than 2 dozen. Yes.
22.
There are 22 certified ESPs right now. What takes longer and what is harder? Implementing and supporting an infrastructure or spending a week on an assessment?
Yep.
I'm going to go with option 1 just because you said the week comment.
I mean, it's the bottleneck is not the C3PAOs. It's just not.
Yep. It's always implementation.
And by the way, I thought it was going to be when I saw the low numbers. And then when the assessors were like, no, we're ready. I was like, that's crazy. That means that many people that signed up and put a deposit down, like, have wasted the money of the company because they're not actually ready.
Yeah. So Daniel, you're saying that the common refrain that we hear out there is that there's months and months of lead time is not actual reality.
To Scott's point, depending on the size of the assessor, right? A 3-person assessing organization, sure, they're going to have a bigger backlog. But some of our partners that are larger in size, they can take literally assessments on within 2, 3, 4 weeks tops. Yeah. Because to that point, like you had Fernando on your podcast earlier in the year. And in January, every C3PO was like, we're booked till October.
Right.
And we're like, oh no, like it actually happened. The backlog happened. And then 30, 45 days later, I asked these same teams and I'm like, hey guys, are you still October? Are you now the end of the year? Where are you? They're like, no, we can start in a few weeks. There were just so many false starts that they're like, we have capacity now. We have people sitting on their hands wanting more things to do.
Yeah. So Alyssa, yeah, there you go. That was exactly what I was about to respond to. Jacob read my mind. So of those 22 ESPs that are certified, the vast majority of them are very, very small, MSPs, MSSPs. I would say over half are under 20 employees. Probably another 40% are under 60 employees. So there's only about 2 or 3 that are over 100 employees in the ESP. There's just not very many large ones. So how many of them can support small companies? Most of them can, right? I mean, a lot of the smaller MSPs really focus on supporting those really small OSCs. Your 1 to 10 to 15 people. So yeah, I mean, there are a fair number of options out there for small businesses. Now, the challenge is that there's a lot of those small businesses, and those small ESPs don't have the scale to support all the small businesses that are out there. So that's where we have a capacity problem.
Yeah. And so the small businesses, I'll be honest, typically can't afford what it costs an MSP to support them for CMMC. Quite honestly, I mean, that's the other side of the equation. That yes, we need more ESPs that can support small business. Absolutely, we love small business. Scott, we were once a small business, right? But there's also can a company afford to pay for the support they need for CMMC? I mean, we've seen people get out of the defense space altogether. We've seen people having to go and petition for loans. We've seen just about every type of outcome there. And it's just very, very difficult for them to find the money that was unbudgeted because they quite honestly thought CMMC was going to get doged. And the DoD would never do this to the supply chain.
Remember that, everybody?
Man.
Well, maybe they would have compliance people to hire if Scott would quit hogging all of them and hiring them at Summit 7. Yeah. Gosh.
Well, sorry, I'm partial to our customers, and I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of our customers.
Hey, Vince Scott is in the house. He always has awesome info coming out of the ecosystem. He says, based on informal polling, I estimate, he talks a lot of C3PAOs. I estimate 80% of companies who call a C3PAO are not making it through phase 1. Most are not making it into phase 1. This is what we refer to as a false start. Is that people won't make it. They literally won't qualify to go through the full assessment. So we don't predict at this point that most companies will fail a CMMC assessment. Failure rates will remain pretty low because of the way pre-assessment review works. Most companies will just not qualify to continue through the actual assessment, and you'll get a false start. This is a metric. If you guys tune into the AB Town Hall next week, which I recommend everybody does, pester them for me. I want them to track this metric. I want them to track the rate of false starts, because it would let people know that you are not as ready as you think, because 80% of people who call up a C3PAO are not ready. So I think that would be very, very helpful, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
So can you click on Alyssa's comment there?
Sure.
This last one.
Alyssa's got the award for best commenter of July so far.
So I'm not familiar with the CSSP. Is that a cloud solution service provider? I'm not sure what that is. ESP is the combination of MSP or managed service provider or managed security service provider. So think managed IT or managed security or managed help desk and managed SOC, right? So that's what an ESP is in the parlance here. So there's MSPs that do 1 to 10 employees everywhere, all over the place, right? Now, how many of those, like I said, there's only 22 of those certified MSPs/MSSPs out there today.
Now, I think to follow up on that, if you're talking about cloud service providers that have a FedRAMP or GovCloud offering with minimum seat counts to purchase the licensing, you're not incorrect. Some of those services expect to only sell that service to government agencies or larger enterprises, or they'll go through partner programs and allow MSPs to resell that service at a lower user seat count, right? So depending on how your request there was, you could have also meant that. And you're right, some providers do have a minimum seat count and minimum subscription costs.
Yeah, and so that depends. So to your last question there, Alyssa, it depends on the MSP and MSSP, right? So Summit 7, the way we do work is we primarily leverage the Microsoft platform, right? So for managed IT, we're managing M365, we're managing Azure, we're using Intune to manage endpoint devices. That's on the managed IT side. On the managed security services side, we leverage the Defender platform and the Sentinel platform, which are again purchased from Microsoft in GCC High and Azure. And so that's the platform that we use to deliver those managed services. Gotcha. We have some other tool sets as well, but it just depends on your MSP and MSSP, how they bundle the tooling or sell the tooling to go along with the service.
So one thing I'll say on, I've got it. She just keeps going. She's got another one here I want to comment on. It's actually hard to meet the controls when you're a smaller business. So two things I challenge people with. Number one, think creatively about how you're deciding to respond and meet controls. You don't always have to have a piece of software or tool in order to meet a control, right? So just kind of be aware of that. The other piece is find products and offerings that have a large amount of the technology built in. That's why we go with the GovCloud, right? With Microsoft. I'm not saying it's not hard to implement these things. Usually the most of the burden that comes into play is the cost to get them initially, right? I mean, if the Microsoft GCC High license is 40% more than commercial, and even more so if you're on small business SKUs like business premium standard, that's even so much more, right, than 30-40%. But yeah, I mean, it's expensive. It's expensive to do, but also think creatively. Use Discord, the CUI Discord. Use the subreddit to find creative ways as well to try and solve some of the controls.
Yeah. Alrighty, let's see if we get through a couple here the last couple minutes. Network hardware question. They're using Unify L2, L3 switches, Fortinet firewalls. They don't use FIPS validated algorithms. Cloud management platform, not FedRAMP. Can I use them?
That's so many words all on one screen.
I like the efficiency.
So the first question is, can I use into what I'll call internal network hardware in a non-FIPS mode? There are two ways to protect the confidentiality of CUI. There's physical controls and compensating controls, and there's encryption at FIPS 140-2 validated cryptography. If I have things inside my perimeter that like a like a switch or an access point, I can put physical protections around them and not have to enable FIPS. Things on the perimeter externally, like a firewall, I need FIPS. The cloud management platform gets a little fun. If it's not processing, storing, or transmitting CUI, doesn't have to be FedRAMP, right? So some cloud management also does security tooling, which could bring some of that data in the scope in the cloud. Some is just general management. That's a lot safer and is typically not CUI. So that likely would not have to be FedRAMP, but again, depending on the cloud platform you're using there for security protection data. So it's a little bit of a mix and match here, in the sense of you could use that full stack you have there with a just configuration cloud-based interface and management tool and be okay for CMMC. My only tiny caveat, and I have to use this a lot, is export control.
Mm-hmm.
If you have an administrator, a non-US person that can administer that environment without a technical assistance agreement and can access or has the ability specifically to access the data stream, in this case on a network, right? So do a network tap and be able to actually see export control data in plain text, that's a problem. That's a violation. So just be very careful on that side of the house. But yeah, you could use this with the caveats I added and be compliant.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, let's end on a quick rulemaking question here because there's a bunch of them in the queue. Why is the 48 CFR rule coming after the 32 CFR rule? Why not the other way around? The short answer is the 48 CFR rule implements the CMMC program policy in defense contracts. So it takes the policy codified at 32 CFR section 170 and it converts it into guidance for the contract workforce and for contract language, contract clauses and solicitations that will show up in the contract agreements for the contractors. So necessarily it has to come after 32. Funnily enough, if you go back to 2020, the rule that we got that established CMMC 1.0 was only a 48 CFR rule. We didn't have a 32 CFR rule, which is a lot of the reason why the whole thing blew up in everybody's faces, because there was no codified program policy anywhere. They just shotgunned out a new contract clause because it was an emergency, and it all kind of fell apart pretty quickly because they didn't have that policy documented. And we've been waiting for a couple years now because the other rulemaking that had to happen was updating 32 CFR, even though we technically had the clause all along. That was why there was such a big delay, but that's why it's coming after.
Can I answer one more question before we end? Austin,
sure, of course.
3 times in chat. Austin, I see you. I've seen you. Do you think it'd be reasonable to classify our remote support tool beyond trust as a security specialized asset or CRMA? It's only usable by 3 IT staff and tightly controlled by procedure. Security protection asset is when I look at remote assist tools, that's usually always the category that people want to put them in. And you have to very clearly define or disable, if it's not a Fed Ramp service, things like file transfer, screenshots, all of that kind of stuff as well, to ensure that no CUI will be brought across that barrier. But yeah, I would definitely move in the security protection asset category. SA would not fit at all. CRMA I wouldn't do. Again, too fluid of a control. And then you have the 110 enforcement if you can't justify it enough. Security protection asset, strong policies and procedures, and just make sure CUI doesn't cross the boundary.
Yep. There you go. All right, everybody. We're at an hour. It always flies by. It's always great having you stop by, Scott. I know your schedule is very busy. If you find this stream afterwards, you can leave questions in the comments. You can DM us comments on LinkedIn. Yeah. We do it every Friday on YouTube. We do it on LinkedIn. We have CUIHotline.org where you can fill out a question form and submit it. You can call a number and leave your question over there, and then we'll play it on the show. Check out the blog because we're keeping up the blogs with what's going on. The podcast comes out every Thursday. Daniel has podcasts coming out on the channel too. We got tons of stuff pretty much every day of the week at this point with news and happenings around what's going on. We're on watch for the next milestone for rulemaking, for the rule to go over for publication, which you'll hear about it from us first, most likely. And let's see what Happy Gilmore 2 comes out today. It's International System Administrator Appreciation Day. And it's always a good time. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good weekend. Guys.